Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the January 22nd, 2025 East Lansing Planning Commission meeting. Mr. Bartley, would you please take roll?
I will. Commissioner Chapin.
Present.
Commissioner Denault. Commissioner Hendricks. Commissioner Lapine.
Here.
Commissioner Overbey.
Here.
Vice Chair Wagner.
Here.
Chair Sullivan.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
They both came in late.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Chapin,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Overbey. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January 8th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting? Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Commissioner Denault and Commissioner Hendricks both arrived late at the last meeting, so we don't have that correct.
Okay, so we
They're listed as
modified.
absent, but they were here just late. I believe Commissioner Denault was about 5 minutes late, and Commissioner Hendricks was about 15 minutes late.
He arrived at 7:11 for my notes.
Yeah, but they're not absent. That's
Okay, that's it. Do we need to re-vote on that, or are we good?
just noted on the.
Okay, that's fine with me. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the January 8th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Overbey, seconded by Commissioner Lapine. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor vote aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. That takes us on to item number 2, committee reports. Up first is 2.1, the Age-Friendly Communities Committee. Commissioner Chapin, do you have a brief update there?
I do. I actually prepared a little report here. So we had a nice meeting on Thursday last week, January 16th. This group functions quite well. 3 points I think I'd bring forward for this report. The first is that we were cited, the City of East Lansing, in a national publication, AARP, which is the American Association of Retired Persons, although now condensed to ARP to be a little more inclusive. Our age-friendly community work was cited. East Lansing was in the national publication, and our chair, Jim Lavande, was quoted. And it was a nice little piece, little perk for EL. We had a nice dialogue also with the communications director and communications department, I should say. Little feedback, give and take, very positive, very helpful, I think. And a little brief discussion about the pending, upcoming to be public senior commission survey. Good group, functioning well, met last week. We'll meet again in February.
Great, glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Glad you're able to join that subcommittee too.
All right.
Appreciate all the work you've been doing on all those. Any questions on that? All right, seeing none, that takes us on to item 2.2, the CD Advisory Committee. Vice Chair?
So the CD Advisory Committee met last Thursday to hear all the pitches from the 9 different groups that are asking for the CBDG funds. And we meet tomorrow night behind closed doors to divvy up the money. So that's the fun meeting. So I'll let you guys know after that meeting what happens. But yeah, basically just we're moving forward, and we'll give the money out soon. Well, I mean we make our recommendations and then take it to council, and the council makes the final decision. But we should have more on that soon.
Great. Any questions on that?
And Vice Chair Wagner, can I just add, I think the public hearing for the different CDBG applications is February 13th. Is that correct? I think.
You mean at City Council, or?
I'm not sure.
All
I had
the
a note
meetings
that
that we
was-
have are public.
Okay.
Even though the one tomorrow is behind, it should be, we call it behind closed doors, where we give out talk about the who should get what. But it's technically all open to the public.
Okay.
And,
Thank you.
So I don't know if there's something where, I think it might be for City Council, but we don't have a
Okay. Thank you.
different meeting that I know of.
Great. Thank you for the update. Now into item 2.3, the Comprehensive Plan Update Coordinating Committee. So I know we have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow. Aside from that, is there any other updates you'd like to provide?
Yeah, the work session tomorrow evening, the 23rd, to continue the conversation about implementation steps. I do expect that we'll have a draft document for the committee to review, possibly during the month of February, but more likely during the month of March. So that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, item 2.4, the Green Code Study Committee. We had our introductory meeting a few weeks ago, and I believe we're slated next week for our next meeting, right?
Yeah, on Tuesday will be the first in-person meeting, and that will be a heavy initial focus on stormwater issues.
Do we have a location for that meeting yet?
Yes, that is going to be at City Hall.
City Hall, okay. Okay, got it, thank you.
It's, Conference Room A.
Yes.
That's correct.
Is that where the court meets?
No, that's a smaller conference room in the City Hall side, close to the city manager's office.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. All right, any questions there? Seeing none, takes us to staff reports, item number 3.
Thank you. Last week, we had a great conference here at Hannah Community Center about community benefits that was hosted by MSU's Center for Community and Economic Development. I saw Councilmember Meadows there, and staff was there as well. Some really, really good information and possibilities for the future. So I'll update you as we consider what we can do in that regard. Last night, the City Council met and approved a few items that this commission has seen recently. One was the conditional rezoning request on Grove Street, 743, 755, and 765 Grove, conditionally rezoning those properties from R2 to RM32. So we expect the applicant, the Hagens, to likely submit a site plan application fairly soon in the future, although we don't know yet. But their intent is to request a multifamily apartment building of at least 5 dwelling units. So the council saw a conceptual plan, and you saw a conceptual plan. We expect that their plan that they'll submit will be similar to what you saw as a concept during the rezoning request, but we don't have a date or a timeline on that. I just wanted to let you guys know that that was approved by council. Also approved by council was a rezoning request on Chandler Road, adjacent to 16647 Chandler, that the Planning Commission recommended approval of rezoning that parcel from Bath Township D development to East Lansing's OIP, Office Industrial Park Zone District. And so the council approved that rezoning and also approved the applicant, Gunthorpe, or Gunavid, their request to construct it was a special use request to construct a fabrication shop on that property. So I'll also keep you in the loop as far as what happens with that property. And finally, the council approved an ordinance that modifies the historic preservation requirements for the Historic District Commission, which have been a long time in the works, and I think the commission will be very happy that that was passed. There will not be a February 12th Planning Commission meeting. We're not sure if there will be a February 26th at this point. So likely we'll still meet, if nothing else, to still talk about some of the amendments that we're talking about tonight. But we'll certainly let you know if that will happen or if we'll defer to March. Finally, I just want to mention on your agenda tonight, the next item is a discussion of potential conflicts of interest. We've talked about this at this commission before. This is essentially just an item to give commissioners an opportunity to determine could they potentially have a conflict of interest, and if they suspect that there might be, we can discuss it and take a vote if needed. There's a form attached to that was included at Councilmember Meadows' suggestion last time, just as a guide, so you can see what the City Council looks at as far as their policy. You do not need to fill that out. You don't need to turn it in. It's just there so that you can take a look, and then if you have future conflicts that come up, that would be open to discussion and a meeting and a vote by the board, by the commission. So that's all I have for my report. Do you have anything to add? Okay.
Any questions on that item?
Just to
Mr. Chapin?
clarify, that's sort of a meeting by meeting, if not item by item disclosure, is that
Item by
correct?
item disclosure.
It's not a
So-
comprehensive, yeah.
Correct.
Meeting by meeting, item by item, okay.
That was going to be my question as well. So we're not expected to fill this out as a front-end conflict of interest disclosure. Are we expected to fill this out if there's an item on the agenda that could be, we're just
No.
expected to
The
declare?
form is just included as the
Informational.
guidance for you.
Okay.
If I could just say something, you know, we fill it out, but the expectation is, as an item on the agenda arises, one of us will make a motion to be excused because of this, so we reveal it to the public. I will tell you that in 90% of the cases where I've revealed the potential conflict of interest, usually I'm on a board or commission that might have something before the council, I have been excused. But the last time I was on council and I said, hey, I'm on this board or commission, you're about to award money to them, I'd like to be excused. They refused to excuse me and made me vote, so it can happen also.
Okay.
So that'll be sort of a regular item on the agenda, which I think is a really good idea. I think it's a healthy reminder to have it on the agenda every time, and we've sort of worked through that at the top end of the agenda. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah,
So-
agreed. So thanks for including that, and thanks for finding that form. That's helpful. So we'll discuss that as needed. Any questions on this before we move on? All right, seeing none. This takes us on to, are there any other commissioner announcements? This is also the time on the agenda for that. No, seeing none. Okay. This takes us on to item number 5, communications from citizens. I did not see any written communications in the agenda packet. So at this point, we can take verbal from the audience. I'll do a little housekeeping here. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes. There's no public hearings tonight, so this is your opportunity to address the commission. And if you do speak, please identify yourself on the card that's up there. So are there any members that wish to come forward?
Good evening, Matt Hagan, Hagan Realty, 927 East Grand River. I don't really have anything prepared tonight. There's some code changes on the agenda, which you guys will be speaking about here shortly. It's very early on, I think, in the process of you guys reviewing that, so things could change and whatnot. But in reviewing it myself, I had some questions with it. Sent a letter to staff. I understand it's short turnaround time, so don't expect them, especially after spending last night here at City Council, to have any responses just yet. So I guess after I receive those responses, I may have some follow-up comments and stuff. But obviously, staff is welcome to forward that to you guys if you would like to review that. Obviously, with rental properties in East Lansing, the majority of them have been labeled non-conforming, and so anytime any type of non-conforming change comes up, my antenna goes up and I start paying a little closer attention to it. So that's one of the main items that's on there that caught my eye. There's a few other ones as well, but I'll just kind of follow with your guys' discussion and input from staff and go from there. So if you have any questions for me, obviously I'm here, so thank you.
Thank you. Any questions right now? Seeing none? Thank you. Anybody else wish to come forward?
I guess I'm here, so I'll introduce myself. My name is Nancy Marr. I'm with Prime Housing Group. We have about 200 apartments in East Lansing. The majority of them are in what's called the East Village, so Bogue Street, Grand River, and Hagedorn. And when the East Village Code was passed, we all became non-conforming, and mostly because they're apartment buildings and they're not mixed use. So there were certain things that we fought for to maintain, like the ability, we put pitched roofs over flat roofs, and we wanted to be able to maintain our properties. Even though we're non-conforming use, we wanted to be able to regular, logical, reasonable updates to it. So like Matt said, when something concerns non-conforming use, our radar goes up. We're available here as a resource to you if you have any questions for us on, hey, what is this, how would this affect you, or so forth. Like I said, most of our properties are in the East Village, and then we have one on Stoddard, and a building and a house on Beale Street in East Lansing. And then we have one commercial property on the corner of Grand River and Hagedorn. So we sort of run the gamut on what our properties are, but I'm here as a resource if you need me. Thank you.
Appreciate that. And noting for the minutes,
Card for us. Thank you. Mark, you too, please. Matt, sorry. Thank you.
thank you. Just noting for the minutes that Commissioner Hendricks arrived at 7:17. All right. Any other members of the public that wish to come forward? Seeing none, is there anyone online in the queue?
There is not.
Great. All right, that concludes that item. We have no public hearings for tonight, so that takes us to item number 7, unfinished business. First up is item 7.1, a request from Arnulfo Ramirez of Los Tres Amigos, Brookfield LLC for approval of a special use permit located at 1351 East Grand River Avenue. The applicant requests alteration of the interior spaces for 2 new restaurants, the Morning Post and Denault's, with alcohol service in the existing building and a modified patio. The property is zoned B2 Retail Sales Business District. Mr. Bartley? Oh,
So last meeting, we had our public hearing. There were no public comments, and we haven't received any internally regarding the project, other than some comments that were made by board members. To my knowledge, nothing has changed. Ethan McKenzie is here as a representative of the project and can address or answer any additional questions. And if you have any questions for staff.
thank you. Any questions for staff? All right, ready for the applicant, if you want to come up and provide any updates and answer some potential questions.
Hello, my name is Ethan. As of right now, since we have spoken last, we do not have any new updates.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Can I just
Commissioner
clarify one
Chapin?
thing? So the initial, made some notes, it was a really nice packet, thank you, a lot of good information there. Initially, the Planning Commission, City Council approved this area for 154 patrons, is that correct?
Correct.
So now the special use permit is going to bump it up to 175.
Yes, sir.
It's my understanding, though, that there won't be, by the way this is designed and how it will be used by your customers, there won't be 175 people in the Morning Post or in the dinner area, because it's 2 different functions. Is that correct? We don't expect, what's the seating? Let me ask it differently. The seating in the Morning Post is,
It's 93 seats on
and
the
the
Morning
seating
Post.
in the steak and seafood is,
56.
okay,
Now, we do have a patio that also has 28 seats on it as well.
okay.
So during the summer, between the 93 on the Morning Post side and the 28 out on the patio, we have a maximum of 121 people in that building at
I
once.
just wanted to hear you say that. That was my understanding
Perfect.
too, so, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you ever envision any scenarios where both restaurants will be open and full at the same time for a special event or anything like that that'll cause strain and capacity issues?
To be honest, it would honestly be a little bit impossible, just because both sides of the restaurant do operate out of the same kitchen. So we do not have the space nor the staff to accommodate to over 175 people.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there a motion to consider this item?
Cynthia, will you?
Who's the new Cynthia? Yeah. I like the new format for the staff report, by the way, too. Thank you. That was easier to read through.
Let's see. I move to recommend, is that right? Yeah. I move to recommend approval by City Council of a request from Arnulfo's Ramirez of Los Tres Amigos, Brookfield LLC, for alteration of the interior spaces for 2 new restaurants, the Morning Post and Denault's, with alcohol service in the existing building and a modified patio. This approval includes alcohol service and increased patron capacity not to exceed 175 persons for the following reasons. The proposed development does meet all applicable ordinance requirements. The proposal does, I don't think that makes sense. The proposal does the standards of review identified in section 53(8) of the Code of Ordinances. Does meet the standards, and the proposed use of the property is compatible with surrounding land uses and will not adversely impact the use and enjoyment of adjacent properties.
Thank you. Moved by Commissioner Lapine. Is there a second?
I'll second.
seconded by Vice Chair Wagner. Discussion on this item?
Can I just suggest that if we have 5 sample conditions that have been included in the motion, sample motion, I'd suggest reading those as well. Those are just
Okay.
below the sample
So
resolution.
you would like me to read all of those too?
Or you could refer to them if you'd like, but you'd want to make sure to refer explicitly to also the conditions of other conditions as included in the or identified in the sample motion.
You want me to amend my motion?
You can just continue the motion. There hasn't been a second done, or
Yeah, we have a
you can
second.
second it again, so you can.
Yeah, right.
I add to my motion the 5 additional conditions for approval that are provided in our packet. Is that fair?
Noted. And
I'll second.
seconded by Vice Chair Wagner. Discussion on this item? Are there any thoughts about this?
I think the packet prepared was appropriate. I think the public hearing back and forth, the dialogue, the location of this, looks like there's a good plan in place, and I'm certainly in favor of moving this along to city council.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree as well. I like that it's adult focused. It's a good concept. I think there's a gap in the market for this type of restaurant. There's a good need for it. There's ample parking there on site, and I hope that it'll be successful, and I plan to support it. So,
I also plan to support it. What I like about this proposal, among other things, is it's an existing building, an existing structure, existing parking lot, so it's using these existing features in a way that will enhance the city and provide a good business for the applicant. So I really appreciate that.
Good point.
agreed. Thank you. All right, a vote is in order. We can just do a voice vote on this one. All those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. This item will be on to City Council at a to-be-determined meeting. All right, that takes us on to item number 8, new business. Item 8.1, discussion of a portion of Ordinance 1453, amendments intended to be corrections and clarifications to Chapter 50 zoning and Chapter 32 signs of the City of East Lansing's Code of Ordinances.
Thank you. Also, I appreciate the mention of the new staff report format. For the last one, we thought we'd pilot it and see how it went with a little bit more, I guess, brief language. So glad to hear you like that. We'll adopt that format from here on out. What we have before you today, as far as Ordinance 1543, again, these are meant to be clarifications and corrections to the zoning ordinance and not policy changes. Essentially, over the last at least year, probably a year and a half, the planning staff has been administering this ordinance and noticing little issues here and there, and places where the ordinance could be clarified for ease of understanding by developers, residents, and whoever, but also for better administration and more essentially consistency and be able to really clearly point to this is what we're talking about when there are questions about the ordinance. So we have a lot of small changes that go all the way through the ordinance Articles 1 through 10. What we'd like to do tonight is just discussion to sort of, I guess, tee up these amendments for a future public hearing, which I'd like to do another session after this one for discussion, and then we'll bring it to a public hearing. So I'd expect that our public hearing will be in March before we take a vote and send it to council. So with that, any questions before I sort of launch into it?
Just trying to set the stage for this. So tonight's just a discussion about these proposed changes, and then at a later planning commission meeting, we'll potentially see a draft ordinance that we would review. And
The draft ordinance language is, well, I should say,
I see that the
all
draft
the
is here,
changes are in your packet, but yeah, actual ordinance language would come later.
Okay.
So
Understood. Thank you. Please proceed.
So first things first, I guess, what we're proposing is several changes to definitions. We've noticed a few items that are referred to in the code but aren't necessarily defined, and some of them really need definitions. We've also moved a lot of definitions around. There were several different chapters in the ordinance that had their own definitions, which we found, and developers found to be confusing and would say, oh, I didn't know that that definition was in the ordinance. I didn't see that it was in Chapter 10 instead of Chapter 1 with all the other definitions. So for sort of ease of understanding, we're proposing to, wherever there's a definition in the code that's not in the definition section in Chapter 1, or Article 1, excuse me, we're proposing to move to that section with a note where they came from, saying, hey, these definitions were here and have been moved. So in your red line version, and I included a little key to try to help you understand what all the different colors and strike-throughs and such mean. Essentially, if you see green text, if it's crossed out, that means it's been moved to somewhere else, and if it's double underlined, then it means it's been moved to that location. So the green is essentially just moving, nothing has changed. Red text, if it's underlined, means it's new text. If it's not underlined but struck through, so crossed out, but it's in red text, that means it's being deleted. And then finally, there are a couple instances here and there that are blue, underlined text, that's just a hyperlink. So to talk about definitions first, we're proposing to add 6 new definitions to the ordinance. Accessory dwelling unit, exterior site boundaries, permeable pavers or paving, pool, rooming house, and structure. I want to kind of modify that statement before I talk about any of those in particular. Rooming house in particular, we added a definition because it's referred to several points in the code without a definition, and specifically in contrast to boarding house, lodging house, and several other dwelling unit types. However, since we've created this potential definition for rooming house, we become aware that there are some changes to the city's rental housing ordinance that are also intended to be sort of clarifying changes. My understanding is that there's a definition of rooming house that's been included in that, and so we're essentially, at this point, would like to strike this from the discussion. And we're going to come back at the next meeting and say, here is the rooming house definition we're actually proposing that will be aligned word for word with what's proposed with the rental housing ordinance. So rooming house, I guess, I'd like to just take that off the table right now. As far as accessory dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit is essentially an accessory unit, right? It's a dwelling unit that is accessory to a principal dwelling unit on a property. So where you typically see these is what are sometimes called granny flats or in-law suites. You'll often see them sort of on the second floor of the detached garage. Sometimes they're attached to the main house. In rare cases, they're a separate building in the backyard, but all we're proposing here is a definition that essentially covers the universe of potential accessory dwelling units. Within the city of East Lansing, there's only one zone that allows accessory dwelling units right now, and that's the neo-traditional neighborhood redevelopment, essentially overlay district. We have one such overlay in the city. It's Avondale Square on the southwest corner of, or near the southwest corner of Hagedorn and Bircham. Within that neighborhood, neo-traditional neighborhood redevelopment area, in that section, what are called accessory apartments are allowed as a special use upon request by up to 25% of owners in that area. We haven't received any inquiries yet, so there are no permitted, at least, that we're aware of. There are no accessory dwelling units in the city of East Lansing right now. Where they are allowed, they're referred to as accessory apartments, but they're not defined. And so we're seeking to change that use to what's commonly referred to much more widely as an accessory dwelling unit, and add this definition. So the definition is accessory dwelling unit, or ADU, means a residential living unit on the same parcel as an accessory or subordinate to a single-family dwelling or multifamily structure. It provides complete independent living facilities for one or more persons and may take various forms: a detached unit, a unit that is part of an accessory structure, such as a detached garage, a unit that's part of an expanded or remodeled single-family unit, or a unit in a multifamily dwelling. So again, that's meant to be a definition that is sort of wider than narrower to cover all possibilities. This would not change any way that accessory units are currently governed, which again are only as a special use in the neighborhood, near traditional neighborhood redevelopment area, but simply to add a definition. So any questions about this? And I won't spend as much time on all of these items, but mostly on these new definitions I want to give a little time to. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just curious what the origin of this definition is. And then we had some work groups on ADUs a couple years ago, and I know that they can take several forms, such as a attic of a garage that's detached. But some forms can be a remodeled basement or an attic of the actual structure. And I don't know if this definition encompasses that. It says the last part potentially where it says a unit that is part of an expanded or remodeled single-family unit. What if it's an older house that's not expanded or remodeled that wants to use some of that space for an ADU?
Well, typically an ADU is going to be a completely, I guess, a complete dwelling unit. So it will have all of the dwelling unit elements: sleeping area, living area, cooking facility, sanitation, right? So you'll almost never have a case where you have an ADU that's ready to go within the house. So you're going to require some remodeling. In fact, I would say if you're going to add a door to separate those, we'd say that's been a remodeled single-family unit now. So that's intended to cover any potential introduced ADU into a single-family house.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. And what was the origin for this definition?
Oh, this origin was sort of a mishmash of various ordinances that we found. We picked the best parts, and this is a suggested definition. Again, this is at this point, this is meant for discussion.
Okay.
If there are changes that you propose, we'll say,
I
hey,
just,
we'd like to.
just wanted some more background.
I mean,
on
we're
where it
looking
came
for
from.
feedback right now.
I'm happy to
so.
see the definition. I just wanted some background on it. So thank you. Appreciate it. I'll let you go uninterrupted for most of these. So
I know that Councilmember Meadows has a comment.
There actually is an ADU in this area. It's at 637 Virginia. It was the last remaining home that we didn't buy and tear down. It already had a rental unit over the garage behind it, and that still exists. When this ordinance, when the original language actually was passed in 2007, that was designed to continue to permit this through the redevelopment, because all the other properties on Virginia have a deed restriction that they cannot be rented. So this is the sole remaining rental. It's never been an issue in that neighborhood, but if you drive by about the mid-block, you'll see a house set further off the street, and behind that you can see the building, the garage that now has a living unit over the top.
okay, thank you.
I stand corrected, humbly so. Thank you, Councilmember Meadows,
It's the only
for
one,
that
so.
for that clarification. So there is one dwelling unit, and so what this does not contemplate is allowing accessory dwelling units anywhere except for the near traditional neighborhood redevelopment area. So again, nothing is proposed right now. We could certainly see something down the road. We get inquiries about building ADUs quite often, but so far no ordinance change has been proposed or requested as far as where to allow these. So again, this is just proposing a definition. Any other questions on this before we move on? Okay. The next I'd like to mention is a new definition we're proposing is for exterior site boundaries. In your packet, in the red line version that's on page 5 of 64, essentially we have some zone districts that are essentially developed as a large project with many individual sites within that project. What comes to mind is particularly is RM8, which is sort of the PUD zone district, or cluster development district, where you have lower density. But essentially these are developed as a larger project. We've had some issues where the setback, lot coverage, setback requirements, et cetera, are not clear as to whether or not they refer to an individual parcel within a larger project or the larger project itself. So we wanted to clarify and define what exterior site boundaries are. that's all about this this one. Any questions about exterior site boundaries? Okay. We also propose to add a definition of permeable pavers or paving. So that's down in Ps, which is down on page, pave and pavement is down on page 11 of 64 at the bottom, and the proposed permeable pavers and paving definition is on page 12. Essentially, the city does allow under certain circumstances permeable pavement, but it hasn't been defined, so we've had a lot of question about what that actually means, and have referred a lot of items to DPW. So the proposed definition of permeable pavers and paving is directly from DPW. That's their text. They had some more technical definitions that referred to other standards, for example. We shied away from those and wanted to keep that sort of broad, but narrow enough to sort of limit, I guess, the application of permeable pavers, or make sure it is exactly what DPW wants. Any questions on permeable pavers? It's a big one, so I wasn't going to read it through, but okay. Then I'll move on to pool. Swimming pool generally, we refer to pools a lot and setbacks for pools, and in fact, we have a modified definition to clarify how pools should be governed as far as setbacks, but it's not defined. So we wanted to add a definition of pool. That's essentially water or some sort of container, right, that you have outside that has water that's more than 24 inches deep. And that's consistent with building code. So that could include hot tubs, above or on ground pools, or in or fixed in place waiting pools. Any questions about pool? Yes.
I find this definition intriguing, which maybe it's just the nerd in me. But would this definition include the proposal that we heard like last month around the cold tubs
Yes.
as it's currently written?
It would be
Okay.
intended for recreational
bathing?
with water over 24 inches deep.
Okay. And is it common to have a hot tub included in the definition of a pool? Okay.
It's just a small pool, a small
Yeah.
hot bubbly pool.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to cross-reference that with,
Yeah.
with the rest of the ordinance. That's a good point, though, because that could potentially trigger some fence requirements and some
For
other things for some folks.
Someone's
and,
hot tub they
you know,
already have.
I guess you could even have some 24-inch inflatable pools that would fall into this definition, too, that families could use.
If the water depth, the
24
typical water
inches.
depth is more than
Oh, the depth,
24
okay.
inches.
Yeah.
That's what makes a difference.
So, I mean, if that wasn't the intent, I think you could add some sort of gallon requirement or other provision in there that would clarify that. But anyways, that's a great point.
Our zoning code doesn't have like specific requirements for fencing. That's all determined by building code.
Okay.
And they have, there's specific circumstances in which having like a locking lid on a hot tub would serve as an alternative to the fence requirement in the building code.
Oh, okay. That's helpful background. Thank you.
And you've met her before, but I just want to reintroduce Grace Whitney, our associate planner, who did a lot as far as preparing this with us. Okay, so moving on from pool. The rooming house, you'll see again, the only thing I'd mention is that we found some potential conflicts with Class 4 licensed dwelling units or Class B multiple family dwelling units, which include rooming houses in its current definition. So we knew that there were some concerns there, but then when we found out about the rental housing ordinance having a definition, we are going to defer to that. So I'll have more on this at our next meeting. If we scroll down a little bit more to structure, structure is proposed as a new definition. This is on page 15 of 64. We refer to structures and buildings, and well, structures in a lot of places in the ordinance, and we're somewhat surprised to say, oh, we don't actually define this, and we should. So that's why we added structure, meaning anything that's constructed or erected, the use of which requires location on the ground or attachment to something having location on the ground. Structures include, but are not limited to, principal and accessory buildings, towers, decks, fences, privacy screens, walls, antennas, swimming pools, and signs. Any questions about the definition proposed for structure?
Would a tree house fall under this definition?
Yes,
Okay.
And would an accessory dwelling unit also be a structure?
it would be.
Okay.
And the treehouse being it's attached to something that is attached to the ground, being the tree.
Yep.
So, or if it were attached, a treehouse attached to a power pole. Well, we wouldn't do that, but let's say it could be some other sort of something else that it's attached to. So it's a mix of the structure. We also added study area, which focuses much more on traffic impact studies. There's a question sometimes of what actually is the study area for those studies that are required, so we wanted to define that. That's essentially just saying those critical arterial intersections and connecting roadway segments that are expected to be affected by the site traffic generated by the development. So essentially, what's close to the development is your study area, right? Your critical intersections nearby. We also were missing a definition of temporary. We talk about temporary uses in a couple places in the code, but in no place are temporary actually defined, so we wanted to add a definition. A commonly accepted definition in zoning ordinances is 30 days or less. Excuse me, less than 30 days is how we propose this particular definition. Any questions on that? Okay. As far as our modified definitions, I just want to mention we did modify or propose a modification of building coverage. There's been a lot of questions. We have a maximum building coverage allowance and ground coverage allowance in all those zone districts. There was a question about decks. Do decks count toward the building coverage calculation? And in significant discussion among staff and with our attorney, we determined that we would add and any decks which are enclosed and or covered by a roof to the definition for building coverage for that calculation. There were also a couple of duplicate definitions. Once we started moving all the definitions to Article 1, we noticed that we had duplicate definitions of dwelling and also dwelling unit. So we removed the duplicate definitions and left the one that was essentially more complete and had more description about what that definition should mean.
You just made me think of something. There's a couple definitions throughout of sleeping room and sleeping unit. And are those different than a dwelling unit?
Yes, a sleeping room would be a part of the dwelling unit. So it would be the place where the bedroom, essentially. But they would be separate from the cooking area or the sanitation, be the bathroom. So your sleeping unit is included in a dwelling.
So there is a sleeping unit within a dwelling unit.
Correct.
Okay.
Dwelling unit is basically a house,
The
and
whole
the sleeping
house.
unit is basically a bedroom, right?
Yes.
Okay.
List of modified definitions on your agenda item report. This is on the second page. We modified accessory structure to include a freestanding ground sign. The building coverage I mentioned, diameter was specifically in the context of trees. Diameter at breast height is a commonly used definition. So we added the words at breast height. Simplified language for hotel, which is a type of dwelling unit to allow in-room cooking facilities like a microwave or for an extended stay, perhaps a range, and don't require the dining room to be public. Some hotels have historically had dining rooms, but otherwise it might just be a breakfast room that's not intended for public use. And then removed a duplicate definition of traffic impact study and added a reference to Chapter 49, which discusses wetlands, to our definition of wetland. And finally, I mentioned we relocated many different definitions. There's a whole list of about 30 on there. Any more questions on definitions before I move on? And I'm trying to wrap this up, I promise, but I want to be complete and make sure that we answer questions if you have them. Or Grace can answer them.
Yeah, I don't see any questions.
I think, you've given us a lot of opportunity to ask questions down the road, so I think, I'm sort of in, let's absorb this tonight and listen to you, and I've got some questions, but I don't think it's appropriate tonight, so I'll wait,
Okay.
Broader
And this is meant to be
questions.
first look.
My thoughts exactly. I'm not trying to look at each individual word. I'm trying to think of unintended consequences and,
Absolutely.
large, big picture things. So thank you for providing this overview.
A couple clarifications and corrections in administration and enforcement, just to sort of define what does a person with applicable competency mean in the context of applications. So we sort of added some detail to that, essentially to development professionals. We allow myself to designate somebody else to our various boards and commissions that we staff. Sometimes I'm too busy, so we want to make sure that is in ordinance. And then we found a significant typo in our discussion about conditional rezonings that says is compatible and it should be incompatible. That's talking about compatibility with the neighborhood. So we've corrected that, and that did not come up as a concern at the conditional rezoning hearing last night. In Article 3, General District Regulations, just clarification that swimming pools must be in the rear yard and meet the same setbacks as an accessory structure. With the changed definition, or adding the definition of pool, it defines it essentially as an accessory structure, so this is aligned sort of with itself. But wanted to make sure we did that. Section 50-150 talks about foster homes, foster family homes, foster family group homes, and family daycare homes. And it specifically says that all land uses are permitted, or those land uses are permitted uses within all the residential zone districts. We wanted to clarify that language a little bit, and then we essentially added that as a permitted land use within all the different individual zone districts. So you'll see further down in the AIR in the report that there's several additions to the various residential zone districts, adding foster family homes, foster family group homes, and family daycare homes, in case somebody who was looking at the ordinance didn't switch back to this. They wouldn't know right now to look at the general district regulations. Similarly, we found that religious institutions or churches are a special use in all residential zone districts, but that isn't included as a special use in all the different chapters, so we wanted to add that as well. As the code currently reads, those are listed as churches, which is a religious specific term, so we decided to change that to what's commonly seen more in zoning ordinances, which is religious institutions. So that language we changed in that section, and then we also added religious institutions as a special use in all the individual residential zone district sections. So we're actually getting into the residential district sections then. Article 4, which is single family and two family residential districts. The first district is the RA zone, the residential agricultural zone. Like I mentioned, we added foster family homes, foster family group homes, family daycare homes to permitted uses in that district, instead of making somebody refer back to a chapter they can't find. And also religious institutions to the list of special uses in that district. Similarly, child care centers, daycare centers, and group daycare homes are also special uses per section 50-150 in all residential zone districts. So similarly to foster homes, we added that as a special use in all the residential zone districts, including RA. Same changes to R1, R2, R3. Those are the only changes, except for some renumbering in the R2 and R3 zone districts, that resulted from adding those land uses. So again, we're not changing how those land uses are governed. We're just adding the language in each individual section, so that the casual observer will be able to recognize that those are actually permitted land uses in some sense in those districts. Any questions about that?
Landon?
Yes.
This is just in the weeds, so just humor me for a sec. The family daycare home, where is that defined? Is that something the city of East Lansing defines, or are you using a state definition? Because I've never seen that phrasing. I'm aware of family child care homes, but not of family daycare homes. And so it might just be something to cross-check.
That's a good point. I don't see that as defined in our.
But there are foster family homes, foster family
It's
group
on,
homes.
There's a rule, Landon, there's a rule, R-400-1901 is the state rule.
In the state
that
rule.
defines those.
Okay.
It's also in, it's on page 3 of 64 of the changes section. So it's under childcare organization, and then there's, in definitions under childcare organization, and then there's sub definitions of that includes a family daycare home.
Okay. So you're looking in the red line version on page 3 of 64, just below the graphic, it says childcare organization, all the different sub-definitions, and that's where you're finding it.
Yep.
I really appreciate you calling that out, and to Councilmember Meadows' point, we'll check that and make sure that it aligns exactly with the state rule as well.
And I'm happy to send the licensure rules, because they've also been changed to be, they're not childcare organizations anymore, they're childcare institutions. So there's been some like tweaks in the last year or so to the actual rules
Wonderful.
that I'm happy to send, because it's random.
Good catch, yeah.
I spend too much time on that.
Right. So it's tied to a state license
Yes,
then?
it's,
Yeah.
it's tied to a LARA license.
Understood.
If we, as far as all the rest of the, the lower density residential districts, RA, R1, R2, R3, and then the subsequent sections, cluster development plan overlay, neo-traditional neighborhood redevelopment plan overlay. As you can see, these are all, we're doing the same thing, adding these different land uses to the lists of permitted uses. In some cases, this requires renumbering, and in which case we've done so. There are no proposed changes to how any of these land uses are governed. In section 50-323, there's a table within the cluster development plan overlay that didn't specifically regulate setbacks on individual subdivided lots. So I was talking about the exterior site boundaries versus individual lot boundaries. So we wanted to make sure to include the setback requirements in that district for individual subdivided lots, and similarly for the neo-traditional neighborhood plan. Within that neo-traditional neighborhood redevelopment plan section, we have, I mentioned accessory apartment was in there, and we wanted to add accessory dwelling unit as with a new definition to the list of accessory units, which is currently a special use, and that would be, I want to make sure that we have in our red line or in our proposed change that it still maintains a special use. I'm just reading that we put it as permitted accessory use, and that it's currently a special use and would stay that way. Clarifying that in the next section there, subsection 5, allows an accessory dwelling unit as a special use, so we want to make the language consistent. We're changing that to accessory dwelling unit versus apartment. We propose to remove the 25% restriction. I'm questioning that now because I'm thinking that could be a policy change. So let's keep that for discussion. And then we wanted to just change the location limitation from above garages to within an accessory building. Although, as I'm saying this, I'm questioning that as well, whether or not we want to get into that, if that's more of a policy change versus a clarification. And then there was a section, subsection 12, that section about neo-traditional neighborhoods, that parking spaces must be in the rear yard. It wasn't immediately clear, so we wanted to clarify that, so we're adding language that explicitly says that. Finally, we have several sections that talk about multifamily residential districts. This is Article 5. We have the RM8, RM14, RM22, RM32, and RM54. Largely, all of the changes that we're proposing for all of those are very similar to what we did for the low density, adding foster family homes, foster family group homes, family daycare homes, as amended according to state rules, to the list of permitted uses in all those districts, adding religious institutions, childcare centers, daycare centers, et cetera, to the list of special uses. The difference is that in some cases, in the required conditions, which is where you have sort of site requirements, site layout requirements, we wanted to add, we had some setback issues where we had, like in the RM8, I mentioned the setbacks referred to the exterior site boundaries only, not the individual parcels, so we're adding, making sure that the setback requirements are clear for those individual subdivided lots. Within RM14 and RM14 and RM22, I think it's just those. We have minimum lot area requirements for families versus for unrelated individuals. And on advice of counsel, you can't change requirements based on who is in the unit, only based on what type of unit it is. So in fact, we had this discussion of it at council last night with a question about, well, how many people, what is the minimum lot area per person that could be allowed on a certain property? And based on that lot size, the sort of scaled different, we have currently a whole different list of required minimum lot area per person if it's family versus unrelated individuals. So we're proposing to get rid of that family requirement and just stick to the unrelated individuals requirement. It's meant to be a correction. I feel like it sort of comes across as a policy change, and I want to discuss this in more detail at some point. It doesn't have to be tonight, but we don't. Our understanding is that we can't continue to have the section as it is right now, where we're differentiating the minimum lot area requirements based on the occupant themselves. So what we're proposing is just make it unrelated. So in some cases, 1,000 square feet for example, or 450 in some districts. We propose to just stick to that. I guess I'd like to sort of flag that for discussion down the road, because we should discuss that in more detail. I don't think it needs to be discussed tonight, and it's 8 o'clock, so I want to wrap it up soon.
It is in RM 32 too.
It is an RM 32. Okay. Oh, thank you. I see it on the summary as well. Skipping down to RM 32, same thing with the required conditions. So we're, as Grace mentioned, about 5 of the points down of 5 of 6, we remove the minimum lot area requirements for families and make 450 feet per person the minimum lot area regardless of occupant type. There's a reference to commercial adaptive reuse blocks in the RM 32 district, but they're referenced only in this instance and not defined anywhere in the code. So we're just proposing to remove that language right now. And otherwise, we just have renumbering. Same thing, just adding land uses to the RM 54 zone, and that's it. So that's sort of brings us up through the end of the residential districts, through the general requirements through administration enforcement. Next time, I'd like to talk more about business districts, parking requirements, landscaping, nonconformities. I know that a couple of members of the public who were here tonight talking about nonconforming uses are particularly interested in those changes. Again, those aren't going to be intended to be policy changes, but when you change language around nonconformities, it tends to slip into a policy change pretty quick. So we'll spend some time next meeting to talk about that and the other later parts of the section or sections of the code in more detail. Can I answer any questions about what we've covered tonight?
This is a tremendous amount of detail, a tremendous amount of information, and you and your staff have my deep respect and admiration for getting into the weeds and doing this kind of, it's very important work, but I know from experience it can be tedious, and I appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a great staff.
I echo that sentiment as well. It's quite a bit of restructuring. I know a lot of work went into this. Any other comments or questions? Is it all you plan to cover in this item tonight?
For this item, yes.
Okay.
So maybe I will ask
Commissioner
one
Chapin?
question. So January of 26, this is completed. What advantage do you have with updated, improved language?
We tend to spend a lot of time right now just clarifying to inquiries. I don't understand what this says. Can you help? And so this is essentially trying to ward off some of those questions and answer them before they're asked.
Okay, fair
I'd say
enough.
that's the largest reason.
Fair enough.
So public clarity and a reduction in staff time as you're trying to cross-reference various, yeah, that makes sense.
And frankly, we come up with some issues too where there are just little sections of the code that just don't work with each other. I mean, and where they can be corrected, we're hoping to. Some of them will be more of policy changes, and we'll get to that. But just trying to correct and clarify at this point.
Is there any timeline and when we might see this again?
If we have the February 26th meeting, right now I don't believe we have business on that except for this. So I guess I'd ask the commission, would you prefer to meet just for the purposes of discussing these amendments, or wait until March? And otherwise, this would be on the first meeting in March.
I think there's a lot of staff involvement here. So I think my question would be, maybe not representative of everybody, but what works best for the staff?
I don't know if we're fairly dispassionate on it, I think. We'll be here if you, and we can all take a month off as far as planning commission, but this is all on our schedules, so it doesn't really matter. I guess from sort of an overall perspective, I always like to move things along if we can. So I'd kind of like to come back together in February to discuss this, even if it's just for this. But we can be flexible.
Those are my thoughts as well. I don't know if it necessitates us having a planning commission exclusively for this, but perhaps we could do a workshop or something else that's in a less formal
If we do a
setting.
workshop, we may as well just do a planning commission meeting now, because if we have a quorum, then we have to notice it. So I would
Okay.
say we could certainly come back together, have a public notice meeting, and do more of a deeper dive on these.
We do have the one housing ordinance to have a public hearing.
Oh, for the definition of family.
Yes.
That's a good reminder. Thank you. So we do have one more ordinance that will come before you. I mentioned it last time, and it's not contemplated here because it is a policy change that would amend the definition of family to include other people that aren't currently within that definition. So I think that we could have that public hearing for that ordinance change on the 26th of February. And that way we'd actually have more business, but it would still all be about zoning amendments.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Special meeting if needed.
For this purpose.
Councilman and then.
And then the comment was we could have a special meeting as well if needed.
Okay.
I too
That
am
makes
of the
sense.
mind that we should keep moving on this. I think
Okay.
that's a good idea. You've put a whole lot of work into it, and I believe keeping moving recognizes and validates the importance of that work.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll plan on meeting again. Our next meeting will be on February 26th, and we'll discuss the second half of these amendments and also have the hearing on the other ordinance to amend the definition of family.
You should have 2 new members after the next city council meeting.
Okay.
You're going to have to orient them, so.
Sounds good.
And yeah, again, appreciate you walking us through this, because this looked like a huge undertaking when I was reading through this, and as you've kind of explained, it's more of a restructuring than an overhaul. I think that's helpful.
64 red
Puts it
line
in
pages
perspective.
is daunting, but it's not that much when it gets down to it. A lot of them are duplicates of each other.
All right, thank you. Any last comments or questions on this before we move on? All right, seeing none, that takes us on to item number 8.2, discussion of potential changes to the Planning Commission's bylaws.
Thank you all. I'll try to keep this one brief as well. Planning Commission's bylaws were most recently amended in 2023, before that in 2015. We noticed we've been talking about ways to streamline the development process if possible, and make the Commission's procedures straightforward, easier where they can be. So from staff, we're proposing essentially 3 changes that we consider relatively minor to your bylaws. Number 1, your section 2A says the commission will hold its regular meetings on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of each month. The language doesn't specifically allow for exceptions. The commission often cancels its second meeting. Sometimes we need to reschedule or change from that 2nd and 4th scheme, including this October of this year. We're proposing that. So we'd like to just add some language unless otherwise determined by a majority vote of the Planning Commission, just to give you that sort of formal flexibility to modify your calendar as needed. Any questions on that proposed amendment? Okay. The second section is about quorum. Section 3A says 5 members of the commission are a quorum for purposes of transacting business. We have had a couple instances where we haven't met quorum, and especially as of right now, we have vacancies in the commission. It sounds like we might have 2 new commissioners coming soon, which is great news. But in the cases where, for future years, we don't have the full number of commissioners, we'd like to have that flexibility to, if a majority of those appointed and serving are able to attend, that would constitute quorum. So we looked to change that language from 5 members of the commission to a majority of the commissioners. Any questions on that? Okay.
Governor, can I make a suggestion with regard to that? You made reference to a provision, current provision, the general provision relating to quorum and when it can be reduced from majority of the members. There are other exceptions that you didn't include in the proposed definition. I'd suggest that you take a look at that language and just reincorporate it here, but make it specific to the planning commission so that those other exceptions would also be included there. Because like when one has been removed by official action or hasn't made 3 meetings and things like that, that's not included in the proposed definition.
Okay.
But that is part of the definition the city follows, and you should get that advantage as well.
So we can the great suggestions. We'll bring that back for discussion next time. And for what it's worth, this is also intended as discussion. The commission could take action if you want to tonight, but our intent is that you'd also have time to think on it, and then we can discuss more and take a vote next time to send on to council.
That's the correct path. Yeah, let's talk about these briefly and digest these, and then take potential action. And potentially, if there's a desire, we could expand and add things as well, depending on the will of the commission. How is the first one necessary? Sorry, just to go back to the meeting schedule. Don't we have the power to do that anyways? Can't we at any point take a vote and decide, oh well, there's a big festival on this second Wednesday of April, and we want to meet the third Wednesday of April?
It's been common practice, and I think that as a matter of past practice, it's okay. I just like to be very specific and explicit and
You're
say, yes,
spelling out
this is
the
okay.
authority, please. Okay, understood. Thank you.
Last proposed change would be currently the Planning Commission, Section 4C says, as a general rule, the commission will act on an issue at the next regular meeting after the public hearing. We've had a couple of instances where applicants have said, hey, I'm kind of under a time crunch here. I'd love it if you'd approve this today instead of waiting. Or in some cases, the commission has said, this seems fine. We don't have any concerns. No one showed up to the public hearing. Sometimes the commission would like to act that evening, and that requires a vote to suspend the rules. Because of this section that says, as a general rule, again, when we were discussing this, because it says as a general rule, there's some leeway here. We just propose to remove that altogether, though. The sentence that says, as a general rule, the commission will act on an issue at the next regular meeting after the public hearing. So that would give you the flexibility to wait if you'd like, or also to act that evening without having to suspend the rules. Any questions or thoughts on that?
I think it streamlines the process, and ultimately you could end up at the same outcome.
I think so.
So any other
That's all from
comments or questions on all these bylaw changes?
I do have a quick question.
Vice Chair?
For Landon, so for the regular meetings, do we have to add something here about there's like a 30-day notification period, I think? So let's say we had a meeting on the second Thursday of February, and something was coming where we had to give residents 30 days notice for whatever it was, so they could come talk. But if we moved the meeting up by even 3 or 4 days and didn't have that full period, wouldn't that be a problem?
Be a violation of state statute, wouldn't it, of the Open Meetings Act?
I think so.
I don't think I understand. I'm sorry.
So I'm trying to think of a good example right now, but if there's,
Anytime you have a public hearing,
you have to give
30 days.
30-day notification for neighbors.
As far as the Open Meetings Act and public notice, I mean, if you're noticing the public hearing, you don't have to also notice a vote. You just notice the public hearing. So we'd send notification out to all owners and tenants within 350 feet more than 15 days in advance, as required by the Open Meetings Act, and also publish it in a circulating paper.
Okay.
And that's for the public hearing. We don't typically, though, notice the following hearing for the vote. We just notice the public hearing. So that's still been, our notification requirements would be met even with this change. because we're still noticing the public hearing.
Just as long as we're,
I think what you're saying too is we can't just decide, hey, we're gonna meet a week from now, and vote that we're gonna meet a week from now, because that would be a violation of the 30-day requirement of the Open Meetings Act. And so I think it will be subject to,
I think that was your question.
yeah.
yeah, sorry.
I understand better. No, we're okay.
As long as we're covered, I think.
Yeah. I think it's, the onus is on staff to notice those and post those, and I think if we were to, so we couldn't do that. So
If we were to
that's a good point,
change the
though.
meeting schedule, but the commission adopts its own meeting schedule every year. And
Yep.
this would just give you the flexibility as to when those meetings are. But if you were to change your
Within the
schedule-
appropriate statutory time frame, we would have to, so we
Yes.
could change something potentially, a month down the line or 40 days down the line, but not, 3 days down the line, which is a good point. So, okay, any other comments or questions? That was a good flag on that one. All right, seeing none, I think we'll see this at a later meeting, potentially that second one in
Plan on bringing it back
February.
then.
All right, are there any commissioner concerns? Item 9. Seeing none, I'll just mention we're finalizing a wave of interviews, and potentially we should be seating 2 new members here within the near future. So I don't know if there's anything in addition you want to add to that. But
We're moving as
yeah,
fast as we can.
moving as fast as we can, moving forward on that. So should be good to have some new faces on here to help out. So any additional concerns or questions? All right, I believe a motion to adjourn is in order. Moved by Commissioner Lapine, seconded by Commissioner Overbey. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:15 PM. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.